Good morning, good evening. I'm good afternoon from where you're joining me, and we'll dive straight into this week's chapter 49. The author will now describe contractions in general, and will conclude that just as God overcame all obstacles because of his love for the Jews and created finite worlds and creatures, so too as water mirrors a reflection of a face, should every Jew overcome all the obstacles and come to experience the love of God. Moreover, just as God brought forth his light into this world, into a manner that transcended orderly and limited progression, so too every Jew should seek to serve God not only in an orderly and limited fashion, without limit, renouncing everything for the sake of his love, for the sake of love of him. Even limitations foisted upon him by the world's very nature should not act as an impediment to his service of God. Since Atzilut is godliness itself, it is not considered to be created ex nihilo, something from nothing, but rather is called Atzilut, which means an emanation, form, and extension of godliness, and illumination which comes from godliness itself, in order to create a world whose creatures are not wholly nullified to God, as in the case of Atzilut, but are only capable of knowledge and comprehension, as will be noted that comprehension tells an awareness of one's own being, and that comprehension presupposes an entity who is comprehending. Yeah, excuse me. A mighty contraction was necessary in order to ensure that the light of God is manifest in Atzilut should be hidden, and that only a contracted form of light should illuminate and create the creatures of the world of Berea, which are on the level of creation ex nihilo. The purpose of all contraction is the creation of the material human body and the subjugation of man of the Sitra Achra. The Sitra Achra means the other side, which is defined and discussed in previous chapters, to bring about the preeminence of light, supplanting darkness by having light replace darkness, and even more so when the darkness itself is transformed to light, at which time the preeminence of light is felt to an even greater extent. This is accomplished when a person elevates his or her divine soul and his or her vivifying soul, a soul which receives its nourishment from the Klipot, but through man's service in Torah mitzvah is elevated into holiness, and thereby elevating the soul together with garments of thought, speech, and action, and all the powers of the body to God alone, as has been discussed earlier at length. For this is the purpose of the progressive descent of the world. The ultimate purpose is for all descents from level to level and world to world in this physical world. It is here that the Jew is able, through his or her divine service, to effect the subjugation of evil and the preeminence of light supplanting darkness. The Alter Rebbe now goes on to say that just as God loved for the Jews overcame all obstacles, and as it were, stood in the way of creating this physical world, contracting his infinite light so that finite beings could be created, so too should every Jew respond in kind, by overcoming all obstacles that hinder him or her from serving God. Furthermore, his or her level of service should not be finite, but infinite. Just as water reflects an exact replica of one's face, so too, with regard to the heart of man and his fellow, the love of one person to another results in another person's loving him as well. This means to say that God created a world in which man may serve him, and by doing so, man is uplifted to God. But how is it possible for love to bring about a contraction? Well, love signifies kindness and expansiveness, while contraction and concealment characterize severity. The Alter Rebbe answers this implied question by pointing out that we find that love too can bring about contraction, as Gemara now quoted. For love impels the flesh, so that the flesh will not impede it. Thus, because of God's love for his people, figuratively speaking, he set aside great light and concealed it through many contractions and so on. This being so, how much more, an infinite number of times more, as is fitting, a man should relinquish and set aside all he possesses, both spiritually and physically, and renounce everything. The Alter Rebbe explains that the purpose of the blessing is to serve the preparation to the Shema. The main objective of the Shema is attaining a love of God with one's both inclinations, so that not only the divine soul, but the animal soul, the Yetzer Hara, has also come to love God. And for this, one must first meditate on the content of the blessing in the Shema, which describes itself in the vocation of the angels and other creatures. Thus, the blessings preceding the Shema are indeed similar to the other blessings, just as sages institute the blessing to be recited before performing any particular mitzvah in order to make the person a receptacle for the beneficent flow he received from its performance. So too did they institute the blessings preceding the Shema in order for one to properly perform that mitzvah. But the reason is that the essence of the recital of Shema is to fill the injunction with all your heart, that is, with both inclinations. That a Jew should love God with the whole of his heart, with his animal soul and the evil inclination, i.e., is God's command that imbues a man's nature with bond to his wife and children. These are your heart, the things to which his heart is bound, and they are not to hinder his divine service. The whole world is full of this glory, namely the community of Israel above, i.e. the Malchut of Tzilut, the sort of the Jewish souls are called earth, and Israel on this earth below, wherein Jews perform Torah mitzvah. For which reason specifically is this world filled with his glory? It is here that God clothed and revealed himself, as explained earlier. Lord our God, you have loved us with an everlasting love. That is to say that he set aside also Pinal holy host, the heavenly angels, for not the ultimate intent of creation. Love affects concealment and contraction. So too did God's love for his people bring about a certain contraction, in that he chose the service of the Jewish souls in the state in which they are found here below, clothed in physical bodies and in the finite world. Excuse me 1 second. True freedom of choice can only come about when one has two completely equal choices. When two things, however, are unequal, one does not freely choose one over the other. The qualities found in one and lacking in the other compel the choice. It is therefore impossible to say, you have chosen us, refers to the Jewish souls, for there can be no comparison between Jewish and non-Jewish souls, inasmuch as a Jewish soul is truly a part of God above. Rather, you have chosen us refers to the Jew's material body, which in its corporality is similar to the bodies of non-Jews. God freely chose Jewish bodies to be the proper receptacle for Jewish souls, designing that through the deeds performed by the body, for all physical mitzvah demand bodily participation, the Jews should become united with him. This the Alter Rebbe goes on to explain, first continuing the quote from Abbat Olam. The Alter Rebbe will soon conclude that meditating on the concepts appearing in the blessing of the Shema leads a Jew to the proper realization of the Shema, attaining an ardent love for God. The soul will spontaneously be kindled with love for God, and it will clothe itself in a spirit of benevolence, willingly, to lay down and resolutely to abandon all he or she possesses, for it will no longer be of major importance to him or her, in order to cleave to him and to be absorbed into his light with attachment and longing, and so forth, in the manner of kissing, with an attachment of spirit to spirit, as explained earlier. Just as kissing not only the cleaving of mouths, but also the communion of breath, so too does spiritual unity involve the union of man's spirit with God. Man's spirit becomes one with God. The mouth is the outlet of the breath. However, since what is crucial is understanding Torah, for through this union of spirit with spirit is effected, one must utter the words in order to arrive at his love. The Alter Rebbe now addresses himself to this question and says that while it is true for man himself, either divine soul clinging to God is attained chiefly through understanding Torah, yet this only suffices for the divine soul. In order for the divine plan to be realized, either godliness must be drawn down upon the animal soul as well as into the world as a whole. One must speak the words of Torah. This is because the physical words are uttered by the animal soul, which is in turn affected by them. Since a person has the strength to speak because he received physical nourishment, it follows that when he utters words of Torah, God's ultimate intent of drawing down holiness into this physical world is realized, and the whole world is filled with his glory. Understanding the self-same reason applies not only to speaking words of Torah, but also explains why mitzvot are performed with the physical body, utilizing objects of the material world, which is to them that God is manifested in the animal soul and in the material world as a whole. Here, however, the matter under discussion is Torah knowledge. In this instance, although nothing can unite the divine soul, its source more complete than the contemplation of Torah, it is nevertheless necessary for one to utter the word of Torah as well, in order to draw down godliness into one's animal soul and indeed into the whole material world. In order for godliness to be properly drawn down through Torah mitzvah, it is necessary that there be an elevation of Amarim nevukim, emanating from man's love of God to the degree that he's ready to forgo everything for his sake. With this, the Alter Rebbe concludes the theme beginning in chapter 46 regarding love likened to water mirroring the image of a face, and concerning which he had said that the Shema and its introductory blessings are especially effective in awakening it. Commentary on the Rebbe on the conclusion to chapter 49. But how does while the mouth, however, one does not fill, for this is the purpose. Ach echi vehipa umikol mokom lo yasa yedei chavoso shezehu tachlis. The Lubavitcher Rebbe here asks 6 questions. 1. What in general terms is the Alter Rebbe's intent in introducing the passage that begins, but how does the attachment of spirit to spirit take place? 2. The section from while the mouth that does man live seems to be superfluous. Since the Alter Rebbe goes on to say that in Torah study, deliberation alone does not suffice, and one must also express the word with his lips in order to drive down the light of the breath and so into the world, nothing appears to be gained by adding while the mouth does man live. Number 3, when the Alter Rebbe quotes the verse, by the word that proceeds from God's mouth does man live, he does not expound on it at all. He's evidently referring to the simple meaning of the text, and not, as some would say, that it refers to Chabad, Chacham bin Das, the source of divine speech. What connection then is it between the simple textual meaning and the context? Number 4, what is the meaning of the word and its emergence into a real state? In the phrase, as the outlet of the breath and its emergence into a real state, indeed the Hebrew original here would appear to be repetitive. Number 5, how is all this connected? For it's been discussed at the end of chapter 49. Number 6, moreover, what is the purpose of the progressive descent of all the worlds? Surely belongs in chapter 36, where this matter is discussed at length. Indeed, the Alter Rebbe refers here to that chapter when he says, as has been explained above at length. Here, it would seem, is not the place to treat the subject at all, even briefly. In order to better understand the answers of the Rebbe to these questions, a brief introduction is in order. The concept called unity of kissing bespeaks the revelation of a level of love so inward that it cannot be revealed in speech. Thus, too, the verse says, he shall kiss me with the kiss of his mouth, which alludes to the Torah, indicates that through Torah, a Jew is united with God in a manner of kissing, i.e., there is revealed within him a manifestation of godliness, which is essentially removed from the realm of revelation. Only because of this inward love is it revealed at all. This revelation comes about only through spirit and breath, and begins in intelligence, i.e., the revelation is drawn down to the supernal Chabad. When the soul of a Jew understands the intellect of Torah with the supernal Chabad, his spirit intellect is unified with the spirit intellect above. The unification of mortal Chabad with supernal Chabad is the highest existing form of unity, as explained in chapter 5. Intellect itself, however, especially when it's involved in the state of scholarly polemics, is found within a person in a concealed manner. Even after a debate crystallizes into a final halachic decision, it's still concealed when considered in relation to his soul at large, and especially in relation to his animal soul and body. However, when the concept in question or its legal outcome is verbalized and speech after all belongs into the world of revelation, not only is revelation of the profound thinking that was involved in the stage of intellectual give and take, but even relative to the revelation of intellect as expressed in the final halachic decision, the Torah student's speech constitutes a revelation. From the above, it becomes clear that the unity of kissing is effected chiefly at the level of Chabad. There it is able to reveal, which is essentially beyond revelation. This also is the meaning of the expression of the sages that said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sits and studies Torah. This means that he who is essentially Kodesh, wholly separate, apart, sits at, i.e., lowers himself into the level of Torah. And through Torah study, it is granted to an individual to build this level within himself. Nevertheless, the complete revelation of this connection, both above and below, is accomplished through speech. When it is revealed in supernal speech and echoed in man's speech, then it truly illuminates man's soul. Following this introduction, the commentary of the Rebbe will be better understood. Until this point, it has been explained that as a result of the blessings preceding the Shema and of the Shema itself, the intended person reflect on these matters in the depth of his heart and his brain, and then his soul be kindled, and he will desire to cleave to God. The direction taken by the form of divine service is elevation from below to above. The individual desires to leave the bounds and limitations of the world and become one with God. This feeling can find expression in the expiry of the soul, known as kalat hanefesh, in its love for God. This surely does not result in any obligation to the Torah or the like, in order to do godliness down below. On the contrary, a person is in the situation in a state of longing and is expiry of the soul, in order to become united with God as he is above. The Alter Rebbe, therefore, begins this passage by saying, but how does the attachment of the Spirit take place? Not as we might have expected, as described above, but to this end it is stated, and these words shall be upon your heart. The Alter Rebbe is telling us something completely new. The attachment of Spirit to Spirit is accomplished not through the expiry of the soul, but through fulfilling the commandment that these words should be upon your heart, through applying with intellect to Torah study. Moreover, it is accomplished through fulfilling the command, and you should speak of them. Through speaking with the Torah and the direction taken by this form of divine service is contrary to the elevation from below to above. For speech signifies drawing down in revelation, since there must be an attachment of spirit to spirit, and supernal spirit is supernal wisdom. A Torah concentration in Torah therefore affects, as explained in chapter 5, the ultimate unity of Chabad with God, man's Chabad with God, and this is the attachment of spirit to spirit. However, One might think that uttering words of Torah on which a person has already been deliberating only reveals the unification of Chabad with Chabad, and no more than this is accomplished by fulfilling the command that you should speak of them. In other words, we might think that speech merely relates to that which has inspired in one's intellect, namely that his intellect is united with his supernal intellect. If this is so, it would contradict statements appearing in chapters 45 and 46, and also contradict the meaning of the verse, he shall kiss him with the kiss of his mouth, which, as explained earlier, signified the unification of man's speech with God's speech being the halacha. The Alter Rebbe therefore goes on to state, while the mouth, either the supernal mouth as well as man's mouth, kissing being from mouth to mouth, is the outlet of the breath and its emergence into a real state. He does not provide any additional explanation, since he speaks of the simple meaning of these words, namely that the mouth emits the spirit and wisdom on which the person has previously concentrated. This is the revelation of the spirit, which is the revelation of the thinking process and its conclusion. All of this emitted by the mouth in a manner of revelation. This means the following. The spirit refers to intellectual concentration. Then there is its revelation, the revelation of the spirit being the intellectual conclusion. All this is emitted by the mouth in a manner of revelation. Before the words are uttered by the mouth, the conclusion exists only in the mind. Through speech, however, both the thinking process and the conceptual conclusion are revealed in actuality. The Alter Rebbe therefore concludes that the mouth represents the category of speech engaged in word of Torah. It is necessary for the Torah concept and conclusions of one's study to be revealed within the spoken word. The reason for this is given in his next phrase. For by every word that proceeds from God's mouth does man live. The word that ultimately proceeds from God's mouth is not a preliminary stage of scholarly concentration and debate, but the word of halacha, the final ruling on the question discussed. And on this does man live. Yet, something still requires clarification. The need for attachment of spirit to spirit through concentration in Torah is understandable. However, what impels us to say that the resulting desire to be absorbed in God's light must find expression in the speaking words of Torah. Speech draws downward. Its direction in divine service is exactly opposite to the desire of being absorbed in God. The Alter Rebbe therefore says that were it only a matter of a person's desire to be absorbed in God, then it really would not be necessary for him to speak words of Torah. Meditation would suffice. However, were he not to speak words of Torah, he'd be shirking an obligation. As the Alter Rebbe goes on to say, however, one does not fulfill one's obligation by meditation and deliberation alone. A Jewish obligated is obliged to draw down the infinite life of the Ein Sof, even unto a verifying soul and the world as a whole. And this obligation cannot be filled through meditation and contemplation, but only through speaking words of Torah. It would seem, however, that this is a distinct and separate obligation, quite unconnected with the love that results in the attachment of spirit to spirit, a level attained to divine service involved in the blessing between the Shema as well as through the Shema itself. The Alter Rebbe therefore explains that there indeed does exist a connection between the two. By speaking with the Torah and thereby causing godliness to descend upon the vivifying soul and the minimal vegetable and animal world, the individual will thereby also cause their elevation. They will all be raised to God and absorbed in his light. Thus, the self-same thing the person affects within himself through meditating on Torah, he also affects the vivifying soul and the world at large by speaking words of Torah. There still remains to be understood the connection between A, of elevating the world to godliness, and B, the content of the blessings preceding the Shema, as well as the beginning of the Shema itself, and until these words. Seemingly, they are separate and distinct manners of service. Even the purpose of uniting man's speech with God lies in his being kindled with love, but is rather intended to achieve the opposite effect that I mentioned previously, or more so with regard to the elevation of the material world to God. How it is connected with the blessings preceding the Shema itself, and its resulting love. This is explained by the Alter Rebbe when he goes on to say, for this is the purpose of the progressive descent of all worlds, and this is the essence of the intent of man's service. Man's purpose is to serve God, and the purpose of all worlds is for God's glory to pervade them. This is the general content and the ultimate conclusion of the blessing preceding the Shema. For the purpose of divine service of Jewish souls, and indeed the purpose of all worlds, is to draw down godliness below, as mentioned in the previous chapter regarding the meditation that should accompany the recitation of these blessings. Thus, there is a strong and direct connection between the ultimate purpose of these blessings and the elevation of the vivifying soul and the whole world to godliness. But how is it connected to the love of God through the attachment of spirit to spirit? The Alter Rebbe explains this connection by concluding, however, one must take the step of surrendering to him his soul and his all. This means to say that unless one first takes an initiative of surrendering himself to God, godliness will not be manifest in the world. According to the exposition of the Rebbe, all 6 of the aforementioned questions are now answered. We understand the need for each and every phrase in the text. Additionally, many points found in other chapters of the Tanya are now understood as well. In chapter 5, for example, the Alter Rebbe speaks of the union of man's Chabad with God through a deep comprehension of the Torah. He begins the chapter by giving an example of a person who understands the halacha. At the end of that chapter, however, when he is not intent on stressing the kind of unity that exists from every side and angle, he speaks of the knowledge of Torah in general, not specifically of the halacha. The reason for this is that in order to achieve unity from every side and angle through understanding Torah, it is necessary that this knowledge be revealed within one's soul. This revelation is achieved specifically through the final decision of halacha and lacking in the intellectual give and take which precedes it, as has been explained earlier. In chapters 45 and 46, likewise, when the Alter Rebbe speaks of the unity of kissing, he emphasizes the word of God, which is a halacha, and not the intellectual debate preceding it, for only within the word of God, the halachic ruling, is to be found at the 10th degree of revelation, which is called kiss of his mouth. This serves to explain the other section of the Tanya as well. The Rebbe here solves an additional knotty problem. In chapters 45 and 46, the Rebbe explains that kissing means speaking words of Torah. This is puzzling, for the quality and degree of union called kissing lies in the fact that it transcends speech. It cannot be distilled in speech. However, this would be understood in light of a statement that was from the Likutei Torah, Shir Shirim 1d, where he explains that the love described in the verse, he shall kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, which refers to the Torah, is similar to the love of a father for his only child. Love felt by the father for his child is so great that it cannot be expressed in any spiritual manner, but must be contracted, ultimately finding expression in the form of a physical kiss. This same is true with regard to Torah. It is thus evident that the extremely exalted revelation of the love called kissing can find expression only with its contracted and condensed in the breath and spirit and speech of Torah. This concept alluded to there in the Likutei Torah and discussed more elaborately by the Alter Rebbe in a Maimah Shir and in the Maimah Admon Hazaken and Nachas Halpet Zal, page 142, enables us to appreciate more fully what is actually achieved by fulfilling the commandment we should speak of them. For we see from the discourses cited above that speaking with the Torah is no mere verbal description of what is occurring in the person's Chabad, namely that his Chabad is connected to God's word. The very contraction represented by the descent of Torah into his speech is the vehicle through which the intense divine love termed kissing is expressed. We also understand from those discourses why the union of kissing must be preceded by the person loving God through giving him his all. When the mode of divine illumination that does not normally descend to the point of revelation leaps over the bounds of divine self-limitation and is in fact revealed by means of symptom, contraction or condensation, this transcending revelation is called dilug, literally a leap. In order to trigger off such a leap in the worlds above, it is necessary for the individual below to make a corresponding leap by loving God to the point of giving him his all. It now becomes clear that there's great merit of speech, notwithstanding kissing is primarily expressed in the unification of Chabad with Chabad. The bold phrase of the sages, God who is essentially transcendent, Ayakosh Baruch Hu, the holy, literally separate one, blessed be he, sits, I descends, and says Torah, the illumination descends below. The Rebbe also answers an other vexing question. Generally, when the unification of the level of kissing is discussed in Chassidut, the explanation is that kissing results from the great love of one who gives the kiss. That being so, what connection can this possibly have to Chabad, which after all is a manifestation of intellect, not of love? According to the explanation of the above mentioned discourses, this too becomes clear. The inner love transforms or creates the faculty of Chabad, so that by virtue of this inner love, illumination which is essentially beyond revelation is drawn down to Chabad. As this is expressed in the Tanya, his great name is drawn down to Jewish people because of his great love for them. In a similar way, the Rebbe cites the Siddur of the Alter Rebbe, the Rushdei Chanukah 243a, which states that kissing derives from the internal aspect of heart and mind, for it is by virtue of the internal love of his heart that revelation occurs in his mind. To sum up, according to the commentary of the Rebbe, the explanation given in chapter 49 by the Alter Rebbe about the unification of called kissing, we come to understand that it denotes the revelation of illumination, which essentially is beyond the pale of revelation. This love is wholly apart and is revealed only because of God's great inner love for the Jewish people. Considering this love, it is written, "He shall kiss me with the kiss of his mouth," which refers to Torah. Through studying Torah, a Jew is united with God in a manner of kissing and of the attachment of spirit to spirit. This love is first manifested in the intellectual faculties of Chabad. The illumination first descending into supernal intellect. The Bible expresses it thus: "Only one sits into this Torah. God, who is holy, I detach, sits and descends into Torah." The intellect of Torah, the supernal intellect, is the spirit as it is found above. When a Jew thoroughly comprehends the supernal intellect that is invested in the Torah, then his spirit, his intellect, is united with supernal intellect and spirit. This being an attachment of spirit to spirit. Kissing, however, takes place from mouth to mouth, for it is through one's mouth and the inner spirit and breath is revealed, and it is through the mouth that the inner love is expressed. So too, regarding Torah, when someone fulfills the commandment, then you shall speak of them. This not only tells us that his Chabad intellect is united with the supernal Chabad and intellect, but it also serves to reveal the halachic conclusion of the spirit of Torah. When one's intellect is immersed in the depth of debate, a spirit in the state of concealment, only when it is fully revealed, when articulated to crystallize halacha, does it reach its most complete state, the kiss of his mouth. I hope this made sense. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comments box. I know this was a long one, so well done for staying this long. All the best. Bye.